filthy swines, get in here, sit down, behave yourself. I'm going to read some stuff. Having written language enables you to write down not just artsy-fartsy shiz, you can write down ideas on how to actually make tools and all sorts of industrial things. It's the foundation, it's the DNA for a society, effectively, having written language. So anyway, this article on Daily Mail, written by Stacey Liberator, missing chapter of human history revealed in 40,000-year-old symbols. Ancient figurines carved from animal bones hint at a lost chapter of human history 40,000 years ago. Archaeologists analysing more than 3,000 etchings on 260 prehistoric relics have uncovered one of the earliest known symbolic systems far older than the first Sumerian cuneiform of 3,400 to 3,300 BC in Mesopotamia. This is another example. Pattern recognition is going to be blown open by AI, and finding examples of written languages that predate the ones that we know of, I think AI is going to have a massive role in pulling all of that out. Many of the artifacts were discovered in caves in Swabia and Jura, including a small mammoth figurine from Volkherd Cave in Lone Valley, southwestern Germany. The relics include flutes, animal carvings, and human-animal hybrid figures, all marked with 22 recurring symbols ranging from V-shaped notches to lines, crosses, and dots. The artifacts date back tens of thousands of years before the first writing systems, said co-author Uwe Dutkiewicz. That's your name. An archaeologist at Berlin's Museum of Prehistory and Early History, according to Popular Science. The carvings appeared to be a structured symbolic system rather than random decoration, suggesting early forms of communication or information storage that may have recorded calendars, rituals, tallies, or cultural identity, as well as, can we suggest, knowledge on more engineering, scientific-y stuff, Could just be information on when and where it's good to plant certain crops. Professor Christian Bentz of Saarland University added, there are plenty of theories, but until now there's been very little empirical work on the basics, measurable characteristics of the signs. The team emphasizes that their goal was not to decipher the signs' concrete meanings, which remain unknown. The study focused on 260 objects, including ivory figurines, bone tools, flutes, and pendants dating from roughly 43,000 to 34,000 years ago. Phew, blimey, that's a long time ago. If you've got 22 symbols, we've got slightly more than that in our alphabet, you can spell out pretty much anything, and can't you? You can enunciate any concept. So you don't necessarily need much more, really, do you, to etch out all sorts of experiences. Researchers found that certain objects, particularly figurines, carried higher information density, meaning more symbols were deliberately engraved per surface area. And you have to also acknowledge the fact that there are some materials that we use today that would not last very long at all. So if most of your information is recorded on some equivalent to paper, all of that stuff will have disappeared. So just because you're finding these markings specifically on ivory and etched into it doesn't mean that these were the only kinds of artifacts that were etched onto. If you're basing your idea that the writings are entirely based on some kind of religion of the time and they were symbolic and all that, it's just because the marks are lasting longer because they've been written on very durable material. Maybe their tallies on their crops were written on an equivalent to papyrus or paper or whatever. I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. Other artifacts from the Swabian Jura showed similar markings. Notable examples include the Adorant, a mammoth ivory plate from Keebsklostl Cave in the Ark Valley, depicting a hybrid lion-human creature, and the Lion Man from Hollenstein Stadel Cave in the Lone Valley, a mythical human lion figure with evenly spaced notches along its arm. Interesting. We don't really have lions in Europe now, do they? These and other pieces reveal a deliberate symbolic system repeated across multiple objects. The signs on the archaeological objects are frequently repeated: cross, 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 line, line, line. This type of repetition is not a feature found in spoken language, Bentz told Popular Science. Yeah, maybe it's a tally of dates or times or whatever. If you're counting using Roman numerals, then you have a very specific system for making those markings. If you're doing 4 lines and then a line that strikes through to create 5, often used in prisons, people who are marking off the days. The findings suggest that humans arriving in Europe during the Upper Paleolithic were already capable of complex symbolic thought. Yeah, probably. The symbolic use of signs indicates that these early hunter-gatherers had a way to store and transmit information beyond the spoken word, essentially an early form of external memory. I mean, what are these? These might be tallies for the amount of this animal that this person has caught, maybe? What is this meant to be? Mammoth? If this is a mammoth, maybe it is somebody boasting on how many mammoths they've caught. Other findings also show that Paleolithic hunter-gatherers developed a system of symbols that had an information density statistically comparable to the earliest proto-cuneiform tablets from the ancient Mesopotamia, which came 40,000 years later, Ben said. Blimey. Researchers compared the statistical properties of the carvings with early cuneiform, noting similarities in structure, repetition, and information density. Signed sequences in proto-cuneiform scripts are also repetitive, and the individual signs are repeated at a similar rate. In terms of complexity, the sign sequences are comparable, Benz explained. We hypothesized that early proto-cuneiform would be more similar to modern writing, but older Paleolithic sequences were surprisingly alike. Little change between the Old Stone Age and the first proto-cuneiform scripts. Then, about 5,000 years ago, a new system emerged to represent spoken language with completely different statistical characteristics. Well, similar to how we might notch 4 lines and then have one to strike through, those are the kinds of markings that you might scrape into a hard rock wall. Perhaps this is the equivalent back then. I mean, you could say that is a form of writing, but it's not really language. It's a notation of days past. While not writing in the strict sense, the carving showed a level of conventionality and intentionality compared to the earliest attempts at recording information in human history. The exact meaning remains unknown, but researchers suggested some markings may reflect seasonal patterns of animal migration cycles. Hybrid figures and recurring patterns may have held religious or cultural significance, and regularly shaped notches may have functioned as counting systems or record-keeping tools. Maybe. But maybe we need to try and entertain the idea that some of these things are more prosaic and not necessarily in any way related to some kind of deity worship. Whenever I see that, it makes me cringe, because maybe it's true, but it's used all the time. It's always, this building was made because of some gods, and it's pointing towards that star, so they worship that star. And yeah, okay, I've heard that before, but maybe there was a more practical reason for it. Maybe there's a more practical reason for all of these things. Because if you look at the world around you, have you seen the world out there? There's an awful lot going on out there that isn't particularly nuanced. It's all about surviving, earning money, and all that malarkey. So maybe back then it wasn't so different in some senses. Until now, it was widely believed that the first writing system emerged in Mesopotamia with Sumerian cuneiform around 5,400 years ago. The new findings push complex symbolic communication back at least 35,000 years, challenging long-held assumptions about the timeline of cognitive and cultural evolution in modern humans. The study also highlighted the importance of empirical analysis. By applying statistical models and classification algorithms, researchers were able to quantify the carving's structure, consistency, and information content, providing a framework for studying prehistoric symbols more broadly. While the carvings do not constitute writing as we understand it today, they provide invaluable insight into the cognitive and cultural sophistication of early Homo sapiens. There are many sign sequences to be found on artifacts, but we've only just scratched the surface, Dutkwit said. As researchers continue to analyze and catalogue these objects, they hope to uncover patterns that could further illuminate the symbolic lives of prehistoric communities. Well done for finding these. But I wonder, how many Bibles were carved into rock? Maybe there were some, but most of it was copied down from generation to generation by monks on paper. And paper doesn't last. That's why they were working so hard to document and keep all this information fresh. So I imagine a lot of the more complex information may have been written down on more fragile foundations than carved into ivory. So there we go. It would make a lot of sense to me that many of these things are more practical and marking seasons, good periods of plenty, and places in which food can be gathered or planted. Because I'm not of the opinion that we were hunter-gatherers and didn't do any farming tens of thousands of years ago. I think it's bloody obvious we did, you know? I think we weren't that dumb 30,000 years ago that we didn't understand that seeds could then sprout into plants, and that if we looked after the plants, then those plants would give us fruits. You know, it's just so obvious that farming is something that would crop up. Even if you are still nomadic, you could plant things along routes in good areas. So I think a lot of this information would record stuff like that. Maybe there may be patterns that could be pulled out. I think AI is going to play a big role in that, but I'm not sure the more complex cultural aspects would be recorded on the bone of mammoths or whatever. I think a lot of this stuff maybe would have been written down on more perishable things. But I think whatever happened in the past, I think we were much more sophisticated for much longer than we've been led to believe. And this is an interesting marker showing that people 30 to 40,000 years ago were actually quite sophisticated in recording some form of information. And these look like hieroglyphs. Was this a snake? Who knows what these things are? But they would have meant something to them. So yeah, it's still information that's recorded and can be transmitted and whatever. It's still a language, and it's bloody fascinating. 40,000 years ago. 40,000 years ago, when, was that during the Ice Age? When sea levels were much lower? Most of the settlements are now under the waves now. So whatever those people were doing, we're only going to get tiny little tidbits of information from the silly fools who were living above, significantly above a certain height. Why weren't you living down by the sea? Why are you all the way up there? Anyway, but that is it for now. Make sure you hit that like button. And the only thing I have left to say is Pigwig out.
Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oink, oink, ree, squeal, snort, snort, oinkity, squee. Oink, 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 squee, squee, ree, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 ree, 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 oh. Snort, snuffle, oink, squee, squeal, ree, snort, oinkity, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, ree, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, ree, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 ree, 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 oh. Oink, oinkity, snort, snuffle, snuffle, squee, oinkity, oink, oink, snuffle, ree, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, 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 squee, squee, ree, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 ree, 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 oh. Squeal, squeal. Snort, snuffle, oink, ree, squeal, ree, snort, oinky, oinkity, oink, 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 snuffle, ree, squee, snort, oink, squeal. Oink, oink, oinkity, squee, squee, ree, 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 snuffle, snort, squeal, squeal, oinky, oink, snort, snort, squee, oink, 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 ree, ree, ree.